everyone, welcome to episode 29 of Berry Fun Adventures, and I'm Tanya, and I'm coming to you from Rochester, Minnesota, where my family and I run Firefly Berries, which is a fruit farm that specializes in strawberries and Concord grapes, and where I dye my naturally dyed yarn, Berry Fun Yarns. So thanks so much for joining me, and thank you if you are a returning viewer. Thank you for checking this out. If you are a new viewer, it is great to have you. It has been just a little bit since I've come to you with a regular episode, but I have been putting out daily Vlogmas episodes if you've seen those, and so you've kind of seen a little behind the scenes of what's going on here on a day-to-day basis. And in those videos I've been showing you what I'm making, so I wanted to do something a little different for episode 29. I wanted to kind of chat about my favorite things, because it is kind of the time of year when we think about what to make for everyone else, or what to gift, or what to make for ourselves, because we want to make something warm and cozy if we're in the northern hemisphere and it's getting cold out, or maybe we want to cook something yummy for those we love. So today I'm going to chat about my favorite patterns and projects and my favorite cookies and desserts. So grab a cup of coffee or hot tea or cocoa or whatever it is you like to drink. Grab your knitting or your crochet and let's get started. So to start off with patterns and projects, they kind of go together because I'm going to talk to you about projects I've made and the patterns that go with them. So to make it easier, I have divided this section into different categories. And the first one is hats and cowls. And if you see me looking down, I apologize, but I have a little list here to help me remember each of the ones that I wanted to share with you. So what I did when I came up with this list is I went into my Ravelry projects page and I looked at all of the things I've made over the last basically 10 or 11 years since I first joined Ravelry. Maybe it's 12, I can't remember. It's been a while. And I pulled out things that were super fun for me to make, super fun for me to wear, or to gift. And that's how I came up with the ones that I picked. So the first one in my hats cowls section is the hoodie. It's a hoodie bear cowl. And its official name is the Burton Bear Cowl, and it is by Heidi May. And this is a super adorable hooded, I don't know what to call it, a snood, an S-N-O-O-D, I've heard that word before. Snowl, a hooded cowl, a howl, I don't know. But it's something that is a hat that you go over your head, and then it has the cowl built in. But what's super cute about this is that you could leave it like that. You wouldn't have to make it into a bear like it suggests. But for little kids, and even adults sometimes, you might like that idea, you can add on these two little bear ears to make it look like a bear. Now, I made this probably 8 to 9 years ago, at least, maybe 10. I don't know what the pattern page probably tells you. But my youngest son was probably 18 months to 2 years old when I made it. And I loved it. I was so proud of it. I was very early on in my knitting. It's knit on a size US 13 needle. It's very quick because it's made with Lion Brand Thick and Quick, Woolies Thick and Quick. And he wore it maybe like 4 or 5 times, and then he went with his dad to visit grandparents without me, and somewhere between there and here they lost it. So I don't actually have it to show you, but of course I'm going to put pictures up of anything that I don't have to show you today, and we'll link the pattern page below. But I loved making that. It was super quick, super cute, and fun to make. If you have a little one on your gift list yet this year, it is not too late to make this pattern because it really went quite fast. It would just take like a weekend, a couple days of knitting, depending on how much time you have to actually make, but very fun pattern. The second one on my list here is the Hermione Hearts Ron hat. Now this is a sport DK weight hat, and the pattern designer, Christy Aylesworth, designed it after a scene that she saw in one of the Harry Potter movies, and Hermione is actually wearing a hand knit hat. It's was fun to make because it had lace in it. There's a section of lace, there's a cable section, but it's not hard. It wasn't hard at all. If you've never done lace or cables, you could totally do this hat. It's not complicated. The one thing I do remember about it though is that the length of the hat was a little bit shorter than I would have liked. So I think if I were to make it again now, I have made quite a few of them, but if I were to make it again, I would do like one more repeat of the pattern if I could. And I'd have to look at it because at the top where the cables go together, you know, the way the stitches meld at the top, sometimes that affects the, it affects how you can do the decreases. But at the very least, you could make the brim longer, and that would give you a little bit more length from, you know, from your head to the crown on your head. So yeah, super fun. And I would say this one is, you know, it has lace and cables in it, and it was worn on Hermione, but I would say it's gender neutral because I have one that I made in gray with just colored speckles, and my 15-year-old son will wear it. So depending on the color, a perfectly wonderful pattern for anybody. Okay, and then the last one I actually have with me today, and that is the Kobook hat. I made this one quite a few years ago, and this is by Caitlin Hunter. And this is a fun hat with some twisted rib, but yet it has this like, the brim is a little different because it kind of goes up in this peaked way to give you a little bit more design. And it is a DK weight mohair held double. And then it also has these fun baubles on here. Super fun to make. However, if you're not a bauble fan, you could easily omit those and still have a beautiful hat. And this one, try on and show you. It does have a bit of a slouch. Not a lot, but a little bit, so it's not like a super tight beanie. And yeah, the only thing about this one is I would say that depending on your recipient, I thought that the, what is this called? I'm losing it. The brim was a tad bit big for me. It seems to fall down on my eyes sometimes, but that could just be my gauge as well. So I would just recommend you make sure you check your gauge and that you make this tight enough so it doesn't fall down onto your eyes. But yeah, I loved that pattern. It was fun to make. I think it went really fast because after you do the brim, you still have the interest of the baubles as you go up into the crown of the hat. So it keeps your interest, but yet they're not a ton of them. It's just every once in a while. So yeah, that was that. That is the hats and cowls section. I just picked 3 there. Then in the mittens section, I have 2 that I really love. I have a full mitt. This is the first mitten pattern that I ever made, and to be honest, it is the only full mitten pattern I've ever want to make. I think I've tried other ones, particularly color work ones. I'm trying to think. It's just a really good basic mitten pattern, and it is called the Waiting for Winter Mitts by Susan B. Anderson, and it's just a very simple ribbed cuff full mitt. It's a worsted weight pattern. It comes in little Waiting for Winter mitts, so it's just like children's sizes, and I think there's 6 sizes, and then it has like a teenager adult 6 sizes, so lots of options. I did hold 3 strands of fingering together to make these. I'm a bit of a looser knitter, and so I could get away with that, but check your gauge. You certainly, and I did use a lighter fingering weight yarn, the 3 that I held together. But when you hold them together, you get this really fun marled look, and you can use up your, partial skeins that maybe you have left over. But Waiting for Winter Mittens, excellent gift idea. Then if you're looking for something fingerless mittens, this is my favorite fingerless mittens pattern, which if you've seen other episodes, you will have seen me knit on some of these. This is my go-to fingerless mittens, my go-to fingerless gloves, I think they're called. even though they're not really gloves. I always think gloves are with fingers. I don't know about you, gloves with fingers, without, but that's what the pattern designer calls it, my go-to fingerless gloves. And they're a simple knit 3 purl 2 rib with the finger. And what's nice about these is you can modify them very easily if you want a longer cuff, if you want it to go up farther on the hand, to have a longer hand. I think the original pattern does have a ribbed thumb, but I, without even thinking about it, modified it and just have a stockinette thumb with a little rollover rib. So I like it that way too. But I have made so many of these. I have one child who loves them so much. He wears them everywhere. In fact, I think I have made him 3 or 4 pairs over the last 8 years or so. But he likes them now. He wears them. They're like an accessory, so he needs a new color. He has a lot of green ones. So I'm making him purple ones right now. So you may see those on a future podcast. Okay, so that's the mitten section. Sweaters is my next section. And if you're noticing, if you've been around before, you've seen this sweater because I finished it at the beginning of November, maybe? I think so. Not that long ago, but I love it. I wear it all the time. It is the Louisiana sweater, and it is by Petite Knit. It's a very simple top-down raglan. No shaping whatsoever here. It has this really fun collar, and I actually think there's not any shaping in the sleeves either. I think it's just straight, but it is a paid-for pattern, so I'm not going to share all the details. But it is knit in like bulky or super bulky. I actually held 2 strands of worsted double. What I love about it is that it went super fast because I knitted on a size US 11. I think the pattern calls for a 13, but again, I'm a loose knitter, so I tend to go down a little bit. But it knits up super quick, even with the sleeves and the collar. And it's super warm for us here in Minnesota when it's cold out. Even upstairs where we have a fireplace going downstairs that doesn't, when it's going, the heat doesn't always kick on upstairs. And so the rooms can be a little colder. But it's perfect. Like I'm upstairs now and I'm not cold at all, which is really nice to not feel cold. So that's my first one, probably my most recent sweater make that I love. And then the other one I have on my list is a little bit older, and that is was the ever popular Soldat in a Crop. And this is a pattern by Caitlin Hunter. And this one looks really complicated, but it's not actually. I would say it is a very good first time. If you've done some color work before on a smaller project, like say a hat, and you want to try doing a color work sweater, I think this one is great because the color work pattern is very intuitive. So as you're looking, you can see if you've messed up, you can see what you're doing. Also, you never have to really do more than, I think it's like not more than 4 to 6 of the same color stitches. I mean, so your floats, you don't have to carry your floats very far in the back. Here's what my floats look on the back side. So it's very, I don't know, it really helps when you don't have to carry your floats a ton, your yarn at the back. For those who've never done stranded before, floats is what you call the yarn that floats behind your knitting as you're working the other color. And you know, when your yarn has to kind of float behind your knitting for 8, 12 stitches, it's way easier to get that tight pulling and puckering of stitches than it is when it's, you know, less than that, when it's like 4 or 6. So for that reason, I think it's a really good beginner pattern. It does have some short rows in the back of the neck to help with fitting. There are no sleeves, so that makes it go quicker. And also the pattern itself is supposed to be cropped. I did not make mine cropped. I made it kind of mid-length, so it kind of just touches my belt when I wear my mid-rise jeans. So yeah, very fun make. I think I knit this in like 2 or 3 weeks. I can't remember exactly. I'm sure it's on my project page, But it just went so fast, and it was so fun to see the colors as they came out that I just wanted to constantly knit on it. And this one is made in my Very Fun Yarns DK Tweed colorway, so it is a DK weight sweater. The one modification I will say is if I were to make this again, I would, the neckline is kind of high and tight, and I did have to block it a lot to get that to lay a little bit flatter and more comfortable for me. So if I were to do it again, I think I would go up a needle size for what I cast on at the very top, and just to make it more comfortable. But a very fun pattern to knit, very well written and easy to follow. Okay, we're done with the sweaters. We have 2 sections of patterns left, yet we have the blankets and the shawls. So let's start with shawls. My top shawl pattern is the first one that I ever made. If you follow me recently, you probably realize that I haven't been making a lot of shawls just because I haven't been wearing them. There are a few that I really like, but this one in particular, it is called Imagine When, and it's by Joji Locatelli. And I knit this one, I was not knitting very long, but it looks very complicated, but it's not. Joji has a brilliant way of writing patterns, so it was easy to follow. When I didn't know how to do something, I just, went to YouTube or Googled it to see, a demonstration of the technique. I think it has German short rows in it. It has some lace in it. It has a really beautiful picot edging. So the one bummer thing is that when I made this, I was not very yarn savvy, and I made it in a Blueface Leicester or a BFL yarn, which was a bit more rustic than I really liked having around my neck. So I do have plans to make this one again because I love the pattern and it was really a joy to make, but in something softer that will be more comfy around my neck. But highly recommend that pattern. And the other one I have in my shawl section is the First Light pattern, and this is by Vera Valimaki. This is a crescent shawl, so I love crescent shawls. I would say they are probably my favorite style to wear because they just fall so easily. So you can see, and then they give you this very beautiful kind of, I call them dangly bits, but maybe that's not so appropriate, but they're just so beautiful because they curl and they just lay really nicely. So this one is 2 skeins of yarn. Imagine When was also 2 of the same color. I want to say it was like 1.5 skeins. I think it was like 600 yards. This one is 2 skeins, and you use about 60 to 75% of each skein. And it is, I did mine in variegated, so it's harder to see the pattern, but it is a short row. So you start with, this is my yellow up here, and then you kind of add in the other color. This section, oops, I have it backwards. This section is a lace section that you do with one of the colors, and then you have the solid of the other, and then you kind of fade them in again with short rows going the opposite direction. So this one too, very fun to make. The rows did get very long towards the end, I'm not going to lie there, but it was, depth-wise, it's not super big, so it went fairly fast. So yeah, First Light, beautiful shawl pattern. And then we're on to blankets. Now, I'm going to show you my 2 favorite blankets right now, but truth be told, I have probably 6 or 7 blankets on the needles or the hook right now. So if you are a blanket person, I will tell you that I am hoping to have what I'm going to call the blanket binge week. And that is between Christmas Eve, so December 24th, through January 1st. I'm going to only work on my blankets. So I'm only going to knit or crochet on blankets. And that is because blankets are such large projects, and I often feel like I don't make really great progress on them because I don't dedicate the time to them. So I thought it would be fun to just binge on blankets for a whole week, which is really probably like 9 days if I did the math in my brain. But binge on the blankets, and not necessarily to finish them, although if I did finish one, that would be fabulous. But to make progress on them, to kind of set me up for finishing them in the new year. So if any of you are interested in joining along with me for the blanket binge week, please comment below, because I'd love to do an official make-along if anyone is interested. But otherwise, I would be happy if even just a couple of you want to join in with me, because that would be really fun. So I'm going to show you 2 blankets. Let's start with the crochet one. The crochet one, my favorite, not a surprise if you've been around a while, is the Granny Stripe blanket by Lucy of Attic 24. And this, it's so simple, but yet so relaxing. You chain on so many stitches, and then you pick up and you do the granny stripes. This one is my scrappy project where I'm holding a fingering or 2 fingerings double. So it's going a little faster. It just feels a little more, a little more substantial. And so I think it's going to keep us really warm. I think it's going to be a very favorite blanket. So yeah, I have it folded in half right now. So it's quite wide, and then it's getting longer. So I'm really looking forward to having this one done. But this is definitely one of my I have 2 granny stripes on the needles right now. One that's in the DK weight and one that's just fingering by itself. The second blanket I'm working on is, if you've been following me on Vlogmas, you will have seen it there. And if not, this is a new cast on since I came to you last with episode 28. But I have taken Kay Jones of the Bakery Bears. She has a pattern called the Pixie Dust Cowl. And it is a patron-only pattern for anybody who's on their Patreon account. I think it's like, if you do like $5 a month or more, I can't remember exactly. But I'm a patron, and I saw the pattern and I loved it, but I thought, ooh, can I modify it and open it up and make it into a blanket? So that's what I did. I did add on a couple repeats to make it a little bit wider, but this is the blanket. So it is basically kind of like a chevron, I guess is what you call that. And I'm using my Lavender Loon Advent mini skeins, so I'm doing 5 repeats of each color. I'm almost done with the first 3. I am knitting on a US size 2. I think the pattern says a US size 3. Yeah, and it's very relaxing. And when you use the mini skeins, or you could use scraps, it goes by really, really quick, in that you just start to get bored with the color and the pattern, and boom, you have a new color. And it's fun all over again. So this is really the project that I want to knit on right now, and I'm not getting much else done because of it. But this is the Pixie Dust blanket that I modified from the Pixie Dust Cowl. And again, I'll link my pattern page below, so you can see what my modifications are. So if you do have access to the pattern as a patron of the Bakery Bears, you can modify it and make your own. And I'm sure you could do it with fingering held double as well. You would just have to adjust your needle size and your stitch count, probably. Okay, that is it for the knitting and the making. So if you are here just for that, thank you so much for stopping by. If you are interested in the favorite desserts and cookies, then hang around, because I picked out 7 of my favorite to share with you. Now I will say a little disclaimer before I share these out with you, is that our family, we're kind of high maintenance in the dietary needs area. All of us but one are either sensitive or allergic to gluten. Some of us are sensitive to dairy or corn, and then I have one son who is a vegan. So I modify recipes a lot. All that to say is I've picked out some that I had to do less modification with. If I did modify it somehow, I'll make a note in the notes below. But just so you know, if you do eat eggs and it says it's vegan, you can substitute eggs in for like if the recipe, I almost said pattern, if the recipe uses flax eggs and they say 2 flax eggs, you just put in 2 eggs. So you don't have to use exactly the same. Same thing with like milk. If you are a dairy milk drinker and it says to put in non-dairy milk, it'll work just fine if you use your regular milk of preference. So first things first, my most favorite cookie recipe is actually one that I cannot link online. It is one by my grandma. When I was a little girl, my grandma lived about 4 blocks. My baker grandma, as I would call her, lived about 4 blocks, 5 blocks from my house. And every December, I would go over to her house for a whole day. And my aunt still lived there as well. So the 3 of us, we would bake cookies and candy, and I'd go right after breakfast. We'd work in the morning. We'd stop for lunch. We'd work all afternoon. We'd make tons of varieties of cookies. And then my grandma, of course, would share them with people. She'd trade with her sisters and things like that. One of her trademark cookies we called the Poppyseed cookies. And I don't know if it's her recipe or if she got it from somewhere else, because it was a long time ago in the 80s. And all we know is on her recipe book, she passed away when I was just like 17. I was in high school. But all we have is that recipe in her handwriting, so I don't know where she got it from. But it is basically a shortbread cookie with flour and butter and sugar, and then poppy seeds, and then you mix it together and you roll it into a tiny little cookie. You bake it in the oven, and then when it comes out, you put 3 little full-size chocolate chips on top. You let them melt, and then you spread it with your butter knife. So you have kind of this yummy chocolate on top of the buttery shortbread. It is the best, whether you have them with tea or milk or hot cocoa. They are my favorite. In fact, they're kind of the favorite of my dad's and my brothers and that side of the family as well. My second one is gluten-free spritz cookies. Now, if any of you have gone gluten-free or know somebody who's gone gluten-free, things have come a long way since I found out I had an allergy 11, 12 years ago. But they don't always taste so good. The recipes, I don't know where they come up with these recipes and then they think they taste good, but sometimes they're disgusting. This recipe for gluten-free spritz cookies that I have from a website called Flippin' Delicious actually is really tasty. It has a very similar texture, very similar taste to regular spritz cookies, and I highly recommend it. So that's kind of an essential around this time of year. Then there is something called Healthiest Cookies Ever, and this is by Megan of detoxinista.com, and I actually found these cookies and we eat them as breakfast cookies. So that sounds kind of like an oxymoron, doesn't it? Breakfast cookies. But they are quite healthy. They are not made with any processed sugar. They use dates as a sweetener, and then you use the dates and walnuts that you blend together in a food processor to make kind of a paste, and then you add in either, I think you add in flax eggs, or you could use real eggs, some baking soda, I think, salt. It's very few ingredients. And then you mix them together, and chocolate chips, and you put them in the oven. So depending on how many chocolate chips you put in would probably determine how healthy they are for you. But that is a favorite in our house all year round, not just at Christmas time or the holidays. The next one I have is a new one I just found. It's called Vegan Pecan Bars, and this is by the runningonrealfood.com website, and these were super yummy. I wanted to make a pecan pie for Thanksgiving, but I didn't want to have to make the pie crust, and I didn't want to have to mess around with too much putsy stuff. I didn't want it to have a ton of sugar in it, and so this recipe was really good. I think the crust was like nuts and coconut oil and a little bit of syrup that you baked, and then the filling in the middle, I can't remember if it had dates in it or not, but it was very easy, very straightforward, and it tasted like pecan pie. It actually tasted like pecan pie. It was really good. and way better for you probably than the corn syrup and that kind of stuff. Number 5, I think we're on, is flourless peanut butter chocolate chip blondies. These are a favorite in our house. This is also a recipe by Megan from detoxinista.com. And this one also has very few ingredients in it. Does not use processed sugar. It uses honey, I believe, as a sweetener. And you could make them with, it says peanut butter, but we tend to use almond butter. If you have a nut allergy in your house, you could use sunflower butter, I think it's called. So you can certainly modify it. That's the bummer thing. A lot of the recipes that I'm showing today do have nuts in. So if you do have a nut allergy, I'm sorry. That just tends to be the ones that taste the best, that are gluten-free and vegan. They tend to have the nuts in them. But excellent, easy recipe. The last 2 are actually more like candy than they are cookies. But the first one is almond stuffed chocolate dates. And I do have a link to this recipe. However, it's super easy. You don't even really need a recipe. Simply take a medjool date and you cut it open, remove the pit. In place of the pit, if you're not allergic to nuts, you can place an almond or a pecan or whatever kind of nut you'd like. And then you freeze it. I believe you have to freeze it. And then after it's frozen, no, maybe you don't. I don't remember. You put it in the refrigerator at the very least to get it cold. Then you take it out, you dip it in chocolate. It goes back into the refrigerator, and you can, before you put it in, you could sprinkle it with coconut flakes or nuts or sprinkles or whatever. But basically, it's just a date with a nut in the middle dipped in chocolate. It's simple, but it tastes really good. And I do highly recommend using dark chocolate instead of the milk or semi-sweet chocolate, just because it has a little bit less sweetness to it, the chocolate does, which contrasts nicely with the sweet date. And then finally, the last thing on my favorite dessert list is frozen chocolate dip bananas. And I do have a recipe for this one from Detoxinista, where you cut them up into small circles and then you dip them individually, which you can certainly do. But if you're lazy like I am and you just want something quicker, you can just cut your bananas in half or thirds if they're super long, stick them on a popsicle stick, freeze them so they get frozen, and take them out, dip them in your melted chocolate. You can add nuts or sprinkles, stick them back in the freezer, and then you just have a frozen banana. And it's perfect for a healthy but yummy little treat. So that's it for my list of treats and things, my favorites. And I will say that we do not eat a lot of desserts in our house, but this time of year is the one time of year that we do kind of bake a lot of goodies. And that's because when my second son was born, so this would be 18 years ago, my husband had off he was born at Thanksgiving, and my husband had almost off from work almost the whole rest of the year because of his paternity leave and his vacation he had saved. And so we did a lot of baking. So much so that we decided on Christmas Eve we were going to have what we called a cookie feast. And this cookie feast we still have to this day. And basically, you take all of the cookies that you've gotten as gifts or that you've made, all the treats you've made, and we put them all on these big platters. We eat dinner first, of course. We take a little break. We usually go to the Christmas Eve service in between. You eat dinner, have a break, and then later in the evening you take out all your treats and you just kind of make a smorgasbord buffet of all your treats, and then we let the kids eat until they're as much as their stomach can hold. Sometimes we make hot cocoa, sometimes we just have milk with it. But it sounds kind of ridiculous, but it's the one time of the year that we let our kids eat as much goodies as their bellies can hold, with, of course, the preface that you need to listen to your stomach, because if your stomach says stop eating, you probably should listen. So with that, I hope that you all have a fabulous next couple weeks. I hope that you enjoy time with family and friends. You enjoy wonderful making, wonderful food. And I look forward to seeing you in a couple weeks for one more episode before the end of the year. And until then, you can always follow me in my Vlogmas adventures. So thanks so much for joining me. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that. Leave a thumbs up. to let me know you enjoyed the video. And and if you're interested in the Blanket Binge Week, make sure you comment below, because I would love to have you join me in that adventure. So thanks again. We'll talk to you soon. Bye, everybody.